Hello. Today we will be discussing Book 10 of the Republic. So, the Republic is one of the very popular book of Plato, and it is referred by scholars till date, and also it is very controversial as well. So, I just remember an incident. The YouTuber PewDiePie, he gave a review of the Republic, and he received quite a lot of backlash, and people usually do not perceive the stand of when you're reviewing a book. So what you are going to say the book is different than your personal opinion. So yeah, I mean, such things happens anyway. So the Republic is a very interesting book, but we are not going to discuss the entire Republic. We're going to discuss only book 10 or chapter 10 of Republic, which majorly deals with poetry, theater, and other forms of arts. So this particular idea of Plato, I mean, or group of ideas of Plato, is an extension of what he has produced in his other dialogue, that is Eon. So I would recommend you to listen to my lecture on Eon first, then come to the Republic. Because you there are a lot of references which are an extension of the ideas which he has produced before. And so this is but this text is in the form of dialogues, just like Eon. So where Socrates is the major major speaker here, and he's going to speak about it. And here, to and fro, there is going to be discussions. um, and here, Glaucon is the student of Socrates who asks the questions, and Plato answers it. Before we get into the book 10 itself, so there are a couple of things we need to understand about the other ideas produced by Plato in this particular book, because he refers to those things in this particular chapter as well. So two major ideas presented in Republic is the concept of ideal state and philosopher king. So ideal state, as the name suggests, it is the it's a high functioning state where things function smoothly and efficiently, and it serves it serves the interest of large number of people. Of course, it doesn't serve the interest of everyone, because he justifies the idea of slavery, which is, I mean, of course, not important for our discussion, but just an information. So, ideal state is, the idea he gave, where, like, the state is functioning best for its time, right? And it's of course an imaginary concept. Like, he say this should be the best state which can be. And so who should rule the ideal state? It should be a philosopher king. Philosopher king, this idea is that it is not like other forms of monarchy, where the kings are followed through a lineage. Like, if the father is the king, son is the king. That is not the case. Or that is not the case of philosopher king, which is proposed by Plato. Plato believes that philosopher king is someone who studies all the branches of knowledge for 40 years, right? So throughout their from the childhood till the age of almost 45, 50, the philosopher king has to study all the branches of knowledge, starting from biology, starting from philosophy, law, and the theater, and all kinds of knowledge. And finally he should become a philosopher king. And Plato had mentioned it, that mentioned that theater is not something which is suitable for philosopher king. And there he doesn't explain it much. And in the book 10 he explains why he is against theater, music, or poetry, or any kinds of art. And he I'm going to discuss first, like, what are the major things which he is going to, he says in this book 10, with reference to, like, one after the other. Then finally, I'm going to discuss, in key points of this particular, chapter. So that way it is quite easier to understand, even if you, completely do not understand the arguments which are made. So, if you have key points, at least some understanding you can get out of it, right? So that is the idea. So in the book 10, what happens is that, in the beginning itself, Socrates, the speaker of this particular dialogue, he says that, he do not, prescribe poetry or, poetry or music to the people living in the ideal state. And Glaucon is interested on it, and he asks question why so and all that. And Socrates gives a declaration. Socrates says that, of course I love Homer, I love reading poetry, I love Homer, right? And I know few of the lines from Homer by heart. I am able to recite, recite some lines from Homer without any kind of prompts. So that is, that is true. I know what poetry can do. It is genuinely interesting. Poetry is genuinely, it gives pleasure to people. But that is not the reason why he is asking for poetry to be abolished in the ideal state, right? And he gives the reasons, one after the other. And he starts by making an argument that, so artists are, considered to be the creators of things, right? So that is why the term creativity comes from. They are able to create things, they are able to think of something which is new. And Socrates, is against this idea. Socrates says that, artists do not create anything. Like, they are not able to invent things. They are not able to come up with anything new. So they are able to reproduce what is already there, right? So if it, we are under a false assumption that, artists create things, but artists do not create things. They see something, they produce it. So that is why that, primarily, we shouldn't consider them as creators, right? And he goes into the detail. So again, I'm not going line by line, but so because the work is quite big, right? So so he produces this idea of imitation. So this idea of imitation is very important when we are discussing Plato, because if there is one idea regarding art that Plato has produced, which is discussed even after 25 centuries, 2500 years nearly, not exact 2500, but 2000, nearly 2400, let us say. It's idea of imitation, right? So the idea of imitation is little complex. I hope that you'll be able to follow it. I try to make it as simple as possible. If you're not able to understand, please listen to this particular section again, so that you'll be able to get an idea. So uh, let's imagine that there is a carpenter, right? So a carpenter makes something. Let's say carpenter, makes a piece of furniture. Let us say a table, right? So if I'm not wrong, the example which Plato gives is the idea of a bed or table. I'm not sure. Maybe bed. Let's take example of a bed. So a carpenter makes a bed, right? So he takes up a log and makes sheets of wood, and he makes this particular bed out of lumber. Lumber is wood. So and the bed is something which is made, right? Something which has been what we consider as created, right? um, but Plato says that it is not actually creation, it is making. So he says that there is a difference between creation and making, right? So what is the difference between creation and making? He doesn't immediately say. He says it in the later, but he discuss what an artist do, right? So let us say an artist is a painter, right? Painting this bed, right? He looks at the bed which is right there and paint the image of a bed, you know. Um, first of all, the maker of the bed, the carpenter, is not a creator. He's just a maker, right? So a carpenter is a maker. If if he is not a creator, how can artist be a creator? Right? Not possible. Artist is just an imitator. He mimics the bed through his painting. He try to imitate the bed in his painting, right? So the painting is not a real bed, right? It's just a imitation, a shadow of the existent bed which is out there. So he considered artist as an imitator, right? Thinking of poetry, like poetry is also similar. It is not real, right? So poetry is an imitation of something. So if you are writing poem, a poem on a waterfall, or a poem on a war, a poem on some incident, so you are imitating what is already present, right? Even if you think you're doing something out of your imagination, so it is influenced by some incidents which happens in real life. So it's an imitation of the existing things. So the maker of the bed is a so the person who the carpenter is a maker, and the painter or a poet or a theater artist, an actor, so these are imitators, right? So imitators are, any kind of imitation is not real, right? So things which are not real are, of course, not valuable, according to Plato at least, right? So things are not real. Any kind of art, it is not real. And why does that matter? He continues to explain. See, there is the idea of creator. So the gods, Olympian gods, are the creators. They created the world out of chaos. Of course, it's a reference to Greek mythology, which you need not worry too much about it. But let's say gods are the creators. All right. So when gods create things, so there is an the things are perfect, right? So that is, for example, so let us say this bed, right? So the bed is, a form, right? So it's a form of bed. Bed can be in any shapes, and it can be in any way possible. So the current way in which the bed is, it's a form, right? It's only a form, and the form is made by a carpenter, right? So that is why he is considered as a maker. He didn't create bed. He just made bed out of lumber, wood, right? So the creator is the person who came up with the idea of the bed. And according to Plato and the existing belief of Greeks during the time, so these ideas come from God. Like, so let us say the first person who made the bed, he got the idea of making the bed because of the divine inspiration, right? So that is what Greeks believe. So the ideal, the form is given by gods, right? So that is the idea. So creator is gods, maker, carpenter, imitator, artist. So these are the three forms of things and their, the people who made it, right? Creation, making, and an imitation. So three forms. And of course, the original form is the greatest one. Creation is the greatest one. maker is not as great as creation, but it's a lesser one. Artist is the lessest, so it's the least important action. So this is the idea. And he doesn't stop there, he explains even more. See, whatever the idea created by gods are perfect, right? So again, so you have to believe in these things to follow it, like, and you don't actually have to believe, but you have to think in terms of how the belief comes from and all that to make sense of it. So anybody who believes in these things says that God is perfect, and whatever they create is perfect. So Plato is proposing similar idea. So the whatever is created by gods is in its ideal form. The term he uses is ideal form. It's in a perfect condition, right? And the maker, the carpenter who is making it, has an idea of this ideal form, the perfect bed. There is a concept of perfect bed, right? And when we try to make it, it will become imperfect. So the maker who makes this bed, the carpenter, he is trying to imitate the perfect bed which is out there. And the perfect bed is an idea. It doesn't exist. It's an idea which comes from God. Okay. So he is trying to imitate this ideal bed, perfect bed, ideal form. So even making a bed, right, or making anything in reality is an imitation of this perfect sense. Or the term which Plato uses is ideal form, right? So making something itself is an imitation, right? So itself is an imitation. Now, when artist is trying to imitate, he is trying to imitate what is being imitated. He is trying to look at the real things and imitate, right? And the real things are not perfect. Real things are imitation of perfect, right? So when artist is trying to imitate, so it is a double imitation. It's an imitation of an imitation, right? So the sentence he uses there is, so when an artist imitates the imitation, it is twice removed from reality. Okay, so it is twice removed from reality. So art, whether it is poetry, whether it is painting, whether it is sculpture, whether it is theater or music, it is a double imitation, hence it is twice removed from reality. And this idea is the idea of imitation, right? So poetry is imitation, art is imitation, and so the theory of imitation is this. So this is the most important idea Plato has produced, in his particular, I mean, regarding art and poetry. So he explains in detail how art is unreal, art is just a pretense, right? It's unreal, it's a folly. And so there is a series of discussion which happens there, and that's not so important. But then he continues. uh, so imitation is twice removed from reality, but now is the fun part, right? So let us say that a painter or an artist have got an idea from the reality, and no artist is able to produce exactly how he thinks, right? So you might have got a very good idea about a painting, but when you try to paint it, so there are some flaws which are bound to happen, because we are human beings, we are bound to certain flaws, right? So what we represent is already different than what we think, and what we are thinking, what we are perceiving is twice removed from reality. So what we are producing is thrice removed from reality, three times removed from reality, right? So when we are talking about something which is uh, which is an imitation of something else. So what kind of knowledge can be given through it? So Plato says that, there can be no knowledge which can be gained out of art or poetry. So knowledge, by trying to understand what is real and what is ideal, right? So it is like, ideal is gold, real is silver, and imitation is bronze, right? So when you have a possibility of picking up silver, when you have a possibility of picking up gold, why would you pick up bronze, right? So his idea is that, there can be no knowledge which can be gained out of poetry. And the knowledge, if somebody wants to pursue knowledge, so either they have to study reality or they have to study about the idealness, the perfectness. So reality is not perfect, and so the best part is not studying reality, but to study the perfectness which is out there, which comes from gods. Right. And he continues to say that, no doubt poetry is enjoyable. No doubt theater is enjoyable. No doubt that, music is enjoyable. And he says that, I really enjoy music. Don't worry. I really enjoy theater. But these enjoyment are, they are they're kind of an illusion. The experience is not real, so you watch a movie. I mean, I'm not talking from Plato. I'm just trying to explain it in an easier manner. You watch a movie, and something happens in a movie and you start crying, right? Something natural, something which happens to you know all the people. And you know the when we cry, is it a real cry? Are we crying for something which we actually experience or which we feel that we experience? Right. So when something wrong happens to our dear ones, our loved ones, we cry. And that is a real cry which we produce. But when we watch a movie, that is not the real cry which we produce, right? So that is why it is not real. It's just an illusion, he says. And he gives example of the poetry, how things which happens in poetry are not real in theater, are, I mean, in a drama, are not real, right? So they are illusion and a false experience that we that we have. And it we can say that, so what, so it's a false experience, so what? Though it is a false experience, it has impact on how we think. We know the movie is not real, we know the poetry is not real, but it has an impact on us, right? So it impacts how we think. And Plato says that this is dangerous, right? He is accepting the power of poetry, he is accepting the power of theater, right? He says that, it has power to influence the ideas of people, and that is the reason why it is dangerous, right? And so people have to be driven by real ideas, people have to be driven by ideal ideas, perfect ideas, not the illusory ideas. They shouldn't be driven by illusions. That is why art is dangerous, right? Art is folly, it's not real. And people have, though it is not real, it has an impact on people. And that is why it is the greatest enemy of reason. Reason is, trying to understand things in a logical manner, trying to understand things which are real, which are verifiable, right? But artist makes things unreal. It makes us think about things which doesn't exist, or at least that, wrong idea about things which exist. That is why Plato is very much against this, these poetry and theater. And he continues to explain, so art is a realm of emotions, right? So I mean, so that is why people pursue arts, like, so it then, in music, why people listen to music? Because it moves us, it makes us emotional, right? So poetry, it makes us emotional. Theater, it makes us emotional. So these, it makes people emotional, so that art makes people emotional. When it makes people emotional, right, it provokes irrational behavior, right? Emotional, when people are emotionally compromised, they don't do things in a right mind. Yeah, they are driven by emotions. So think about all the wrong things in this world. Like, think about how, think about all the violence which happens. Most of the violence are not, inspired by rational thinking. So if people thought rationally, they wouldn't have, gone through, so they wouldn't have committed violence. People commits violence because of emotions. And that is why Plato says that emotions are very dangerous. And art makes people emotional. Hence, like, it promotes irrational behavior. Finally, he says that one of the last ending remarks on art is, sometimes art makes people immoral. Right. So immoral in the sense, like, so theater, I mean, he gives a declaration that, it is not all works, but majority of the works will have some images which might, give some immoral ideas to people. For example, like, if there is a poetry about war, the greatest writings of Homer, right? Iliad and Odyssey. So there is killing, there is war, there is, other elements which are very corrupting, right? So violence against women, and all that, you can see that. So poetry involves things which are morally wrong, and there are chance that people who reads it might also be immoral. They can become immoral. And of course, poets, this is exactly what he said. And of course, poets are known for their immoral behavior. And, according to him, bards of the time were womenizers, they drink and gamble and all that. So they are very immoral people. That is why you respect the artists, you respect their work. Like, they have great talent. They can move in terms of move people's emotions, right? But you should never allow them to come inside the city. If a poet comes, what should king do? He should respect the poet. He should give them some prize and send them out of the city. They shouldn't be allowed to live inside the city. you know because they corrupt people, right? Whether by their through their actions or their work, right? So this is what Socrates says in his work, right? And so this is how he presents it. But let me try to make it very easy for you. So I would say that there are 5 reasons why you know Plato says the poetry shouldn't be encouraged, or theater shouldn't be encouraged. So we are discussing majorly on poetry, and let us say, so there are 5 reasons why he says poetry is very bad to ideal state, the perfect state which is out there. One, because it's an imitation, it's not real. Theory of imitation we have just discussed. So it is just forms, and it's an imitation of the physical world. It is not, it gives it doesn't give the real image which is out there, or the perfect image. It's just folly. So that is the first reason. And the term which he uses is mimesis. Mimesis, mimic. Mimic is imitation. You act like somebody. So we call it mimicry. Mimicry is you act like somebody else. So imitation, copying things, like copying, looking at something and copying it. So art is an imitation. That is why it shouldn't be allowed. So that is the first reason. Second reason, it makes people emotionally compromised. Right? Art makes people emotionally compromised. Their rationality is, compromised. When they are emotionally compromised, they will not be able to think properly. And when people are not thinking properly, they will not be able to do the best actions they can. So that is why, art shouldn't be allowed. Second reason. Third reason, moral and ethical implications. So art contains unethical things. Art contains improper behaviors. Artists might have some improper behaviors, right? So that is why, so moral and ethically, ethical standards has to be maintained in the society. If that is so, if that has to be maintained, these people has to be sent out. Yeah, there can't be moral decay in the society. So, one of the reasons why there can be moral decay is through this art and poets. And, so see, this idea might seem funny to us, right? We of course do not subscribe to this idea anymore. But think about it, for a long period of time, Westerners believed in this idea, right? So you can take example of all the religions to come out of West Asia, and they traditionally believe that art is not good, right? So if you listen to music or if you perform certain arts, so it will have an immoral implications on people. People tend to become immoral. Where does this idea come from? Of course, from Plato, right? Plato, long before all these religions came into existence, had given this idea, and people believed it for a very long time. Of course, we don't believe it in anymore. We know that poetry can actually focus on the real problems, and so it can have an uplifting effect on people and all that, so that we know. But traditionally this was the belief, and it origins from Plato. Then fourth reason is regarding knowledge, right? So so ideal state is a philosophical state. Ideal state is where people are knowledgeable. People learn things. People are very interested in philosophy, right? But when people are influenced by art and poets, so poets often speak about the things which they don't know. So they give false ideas regarding it. So it is not aligned with the knowledge. So if you want to be knowledgeable, you shouldn't listen to these people, is what Plato says. So, epistemologically speaking, epistemology is the theory of knowledge, how knowledge arises, and how it is developed, how it can be verified, and all that. That is considered as epistemology. Epistemologically speaking, poetry is bad for the development of knowledge, and so that is one of the major arguments that Plato makes. Finally, he says that the concept of ideal state. If we have to bring the perfect state, right? We have to bring out the censorship as well. Censorship is like so deciding what is right for people and allowing only those things, right? So poetry is, of course, something which should come under censorship, and only good things can come out of it. And most of the poetry is not good in terms of building a good society. So that is why you shouldn't, read poetry, and poetry shouldn't be allowed in ideal state, as argued by Plato. So these are the major ideas regarding poetry from Book 10. So but the book 10 doesn't stop here. The book 10 continues. Um, though, I mean, it is not related to poetry. So we might get into that, in case that, a question is asked from this. So the final section is regarding uh, the immortality of soul. So it is not very important for us. So I'm just going to brief about it, not completely because primary focus is about poetry. But I'm just going to mention a couple of things, and so that will give us good understanding, enough understanding regarding it. So in the final section, Socrates is speaking about the immortality of soul, and he says that among all the things which we see, the soul inside us is immortal. It can't be destroyed. And of course, Glaucon has many questions regarding it. How can you just justify it? How can you support it? And he gives an argument. He makes an argument in support of why soul is immortal. And of course, this is nowhere related to art or poetry. Just reminding you of it. So he says that think of body. You know, so if it is human body, there are many kind of illness which can destroy human body, right? So illness causes the decomposition and maybe death and all kinds of things. So what can destroy the body? It is the illness. He says that this idea of illness is present in everything. So things are prone to evil things. Evil things is that so there are evil things. The meaning of evilness here is not in terms of good or bad, in terms of moral behavior, but evilness here is things which destroys things. For example, in case of wood, right? So rotting of wood is something which destroys. So rotting is evil to wood, right? For an iron, right? Iron rod. So it is the rust which destroys iron rod. So rust is evil to iron. So similarly, there are different evilness for things. And he asks a question: do you know what is the evilness for soul? And Glaucon, of course, do not know it, and Socrates explains it. So injustice is the evil for soul. Right. Only thing that can hurt a soul is injustice. Right. So that is why injustice is something which is very, very bad. And it has to, the proper precautions has to be taken so that there is no injustice. There is only justice. So he says that souls are affected by injustice. However, is the soul destroyed by injustice? So only thing that can hurt soul is injustice. Agree. But can injustice destroy the soul? And according to Plato, no one knows if it is true or not. No one has died and told that this is what happens to soul. But Plato says that injustice can't destroy the soul, right? So the thing which can hurt soul is injustice, and if injustice can't destroy the soul, that means that soul can't be destroyed. Therefore, soul is immortal. Right. So this is the idea produced by Plato, and two major things. One, immortality of the soul, that is a separate section, and the other section is regarding why poetry is not advised in an ideal state. So that is a separate section. And one more idea which can be very, very important is the idea of forms or idea of imitation. So that section is also important. So these are the three major things, which are worth noting and worth studying apart. I hope you are able to understand this. All the very best. Thank you.